I'm State Representative Carolyn Tomei, and you are watching Milwaukie Today. Only this is one of a series of shows about Milwaukie yesterday. I'm having people who've lived in Milwaukie for years talk about what Milwaukie was like in the later years. So today our guests are Anna and Ernie Bisio, who live on Lake Road and have for a very long time. So Anna, how long have you lived in Milwaukie?
I've lived here since 1920. My family moved here in 1920. My dad was a railroad man. He was a foreman for the, it's called the branch line here in downtown Milwaukie. And we lived in a company house. The Southern Pacific Company provided homes for their section foremans. And so we came in 1920. I was 2 years old, and my brother was just about a year old when we came here to Milwaukie.
Oh, that's great. And your father worked for the
Southern Pacific Railroad
many years.
For 65 years.
65 years.
He worked for 65 years. He worked until he was 80 years old. He was 14 when he started. He was an immigrant, Italian immigrant boy when he came to the United States. And as many of the immigrants, young men did, why they were able to get jobs with railroads and mines and other jobs like that. Anyway, he started when he was 14.
Oh, that's amazing.
He worked until he was 80.
Good for him.
Yes.
Did they give him his own train car?
Oh, he received awards. He received one particular award is because he worked without any injuries to his men.
Wow.
The whole time he worked for the railroad, he had no injuries.
That's
for his
terrific.
men. So that was a very special award.
Where in Milwaukie did you grow up?
Well, it was on 22nd Washington Street until about 1941, and then my parents built a beautiful home on 28th and Monroe Street, and it still exists. And I spent the rest of my time there until Ernie was out of the service, and then we went into our own private home. But that was really downtown Milwaukie.
That's wasn't it? Yeah.
22nd Washington Street and then 28th and Monroe Street.
Right. And you went to St. John's School.
Yes, I graduated from St. John's, Milwaukie in 1932 with Ernie, and he'll tell you about that. We were in the same grade, same room for 8 years. I received awards for handwriting and composition, and he received awards for mathematics and science.
Oh, I'm impressed. All right. So, and then you went on to Marylhurst,
yes,
right?
Yes, I graduated, Ernie and I both graduated in 1936 from Milwaukie High, and I went on to Marylhurst. That summer of 1936, I really didn't have plans where I was going to go to college or if I was going to go. It was the Depression. Those were the Depression years. And if a family could afford college, usually it was the boy who went to college. But my dad had seen Marylhurst College being built, and it started, it opened there in Lake Oswego in 1930. And he had seen, as a railroad man, he had built the tunnel that was over there in Lake Oswego. That is the track part, the railroad part. And so he said, well, he told me, he said, you know, there's this new college there. It's a Catholic college. Why don't you look into it? So I did. I went out there, and I think it was just the week that school was going to start, the end of September, and I started. And I finished 4 years there with a teacher certificate for high school teaching, and which I did for a couple of years.
Where did you teach?
I taught at a very special school. It was a school for delinquent girls in North Portland. It was called St. Rose's Industrial School.
And it became Villa St. Rose,
yes,
right?
Right,
yes.
Right. Right. The girls were very special girls. They were put there, most of them by Judge Long.
Right.
In Long Court, the children's court. And there were 4 of us lay teachers. The other teachers were the nuns, the Good Shepherd nuns. And the 4 of us, 3 of us were from Marylhurst. They actually sought the Marylhurst graduates out because they felt that they could get along with the girls.
Yes.
And it was very specialized teaching, and different, I would say, from the usual teaching, high school teaching. We had about 125 girls, and we would have the girl maybe one day, maybe 1 week, maybe 1 month, And then one particular girl I still remember, she was there. She had been placed there by her family, and not a discipline problem, but she'd been placed there because she needed special care. And she was there for years. But I mean, it was very difficult teaching because there was no continuity to it.
Sure. You might have people just for a short time.
Yes, right.
Great.
Transient.
Right. And Ernie, how about you? How long have you lived in Milwaukee?
Well, I was born on February 28th, 1918, on Lake Road, what would be about 2510 Southeast Lake Road. The house that I was born in was torn down by Red Bassler, who had the Price Right Grocery in Milwaukee, and he tore the house down and built the apartments that are there.
Ah.
But as I told you, I wasn't born in the house. I was born down in the cabbage patch.
Right. And you still live on Lake Road.
Yes.
Still on Lake
You
Road.
still
So
live
I
on
haven't
Lake
made
still.
much progress in
haven't,
83
Ernie.
and a half years.
No, you have not.
It's terrible.
Well, we live on the Bisio, part of the Bisio farm. Really, it's a Bisio property.
Right.
The Sam Bisio farm.
Right. So tell us about your early years.
We lived there on 25th and Lake Road. And then when I was between 4 and 5 years old, my dad commenced building, well, he bought the property there at 37th and Lake Road, 4 acres. And on the top of the farm there, he built this house. And he and my brother and Mr. Schneider, who lived over on 28th, he was a builder. And so they built the house through the fall and winter because things were slow on the farm. I mean, you didn't do much farming. And I was 4 or 5 years old, and I could remember walking from 25th and Lake Road up to 37th with lunch, going up Lake Road, and just a little boy. And I can remember going up there, and there was a Mrs. Ray, that was Jenny's mother. She'd see me coming up Lake Road, and she kind of made fun of me because I had the coveralls with the flap down, you know. And she said when I went by, sometime my flap was down. Oh, she'd make fun of me. But anyway, I made it up there, and my dad built the house. And
Now, how long did he have the farm? When did he move to Milwaukee?
he moved there, we're trying to figure out, about 1950, because my brother was born over on Steel Avenue in 1913, Mario. And I was born in Milwaukee in 1950, and then we had a girl that was born between us about 1915, and she died in infancy.
Right.
And so I would say about 1915, 16, that my dad rented the farm from Mr. Penny.
Ah, and at what point did he buy it?
Oh, well, he bought the acreage, the 4 acres in about 1924, 25, right in there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And he died pretty young, and died while you were very young.
He died December 24, 1933, at age 51, day before Christmas, right in the height of the Depression.
And you had some sort of bitter memories after that.
Did I ever? The saddest day of my life was February of 1934, just 2 months after my father passed away, that I came home from Milwaukie High School, and there was my brother and my mother.
And your brother was a couple years older than you,
Yes,
right?
Mario was 5 years older.
5 years
5
older.
years older.
And there were the 2 bankers from Milwaukee telling my mother and my brother that we'd have to move out of the house.
And what bank was that?
First State Bank of Milwaukee.
Okay.
The part was that since my father, who was a wage earner, had passed away, and the mortgage was in arrears, and in the Depression, he had paid on the life insurance all the years, but the insurance companies went into receivership, and everything was shut down. So our mortgage got in arrears, and Mr. Sanders and Mr. Oatfield were up at the house telling my mother and Mario that we'd have to move out of the house. And that had to be the saddest day of my life.
I'll bet. But you didn't stop there. What happened?
A friend of my dad, in fact, he lived right down here on Lake Road in a little house, came to Mario, my mother, well, to Mario, of course, and said, now I have $200 or $300. I can't remember how much it was. He said, I'm going to give you this money. And
Now,
my
this
brother,
is 19...
34.
So $200 or $300 was a great deal of money.
Sure. The money, he gave it to my brother, and he said, now I want you to take this money, go down to the bank, and see what they'll tell you. And Mario said to him, I can remember this like yesterday. He says, I don't know when I can pay you back. He says, don't worry about it. He says, you go down to the bank and see what they will do. So Mario went down and talked to Mr. Zanders and Mr. Oatfield, and they said, well, this will bring the mortgage up current. So as long as you can pay a little bit on the principal of the mortgage and the interest, we'll let you stay there. So they said, okay. So we got to stay.
Good. And you were in school, but you didn't just go to school. You also worked.
Oh, well, of course, when my father passed away, then Mario took over the produce truck going to market, and we were farming. And Mario then started taking on jobs at night. He'd work at, one place was at the Holman and Lutz funeral parlor, started on Sandy Boulevard.
Giving tours.
They got Mario to go over there, hoping that he would draw the Italian trade over to Holman and Lutz, because Holman and Son on Hawthorne Boulevard had 100% the Italian trade. So Mario would go over there and work there evenings, and when he didn't have a group to take through there, he was working in a civic theater. He worked with the civic theater, and even any job that was. And of course, working at night, why, he lost sleep. So in the morning, I'd have to get up and drive the truck to market.
And that was in Southeast Belmont, right? And like 13.
Great. Yeah. He'd have this way he'd get to sleep on the way to market, and I drove the truck down there, and then I'd help him sell what produce we had to sell and buy whatever he needed, because then he delivered to grocery stores. And so then I would ride home with Mr. Sergino and Joey Sergino. They came to market, so we'd come home and go to school. And then I'd doze off during school. But
and you still got prizes for your mathematics, right?
Oh yeah, Miss Mellinger, Ruth Mellinger and Blanche, two of the finest teachers that ever taught in the school.
We had great teachers at Milwaukie High.
They
they were all great teachers, English teachers. Most of them were graduates from the University of Oregon, and great math teachers. We had many great teachers.
These two sisters had come to school driving a little Model A coupe, and they lived in, out by Sherwood, somewhere up there. Because in the summertime, they'd come to market with peaches. They had a peach orchard that their father took care of, and then the two teachers would come to market, and I'd see them down there at the market. Then sometime, if I needed some peaches for some of my grocery stores, I would buy the peaches from them. So we just got along great, just terrific. They carried me through.
So what did you work? You worked in the farm while you were still in school, and then what happened?
In 1935, when I was a junior in high school, I was put on the staff to sell the ads in the high school annual. So they said, now you have to call on merchants to sell them an ad in the high school annual. So one of them I called on was Mr. Brennan, who was the Ford dealer in Milwaukie. So I went down to see Mr. Brennan. This was in about the latter part of March or April of 1935. And we were getting a deadline. We had to get more ads in the high school annual, which was then called the Maroon. Now they're known as the Mustang. So I went down and saw this Mr. Brennan. I said, I'm here from Milwaukie Union High School. Sell you an ad in the high school annual. He says, fine. He says, son, I'll make you a deal. I said, what is it? He says, you go out and sell a new car for me, and I'll buy a half-page ad in your high school annual. And I said, you're on. So I walked out of the building, stood out there, what was McLaughlin Boulevard, and I thought to myself, oh, where is a 17-year-old kid going to go find a prospect for a new car? So I worked on it for a few days, and I had an idea. So one morning I get up about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I meet the Oregonian carrier who was bringing the Oregonian to our house there, up there on the top of the hill of 37th. And I met this man out there, and I forgot his name, whether it was Mr. Jones or Smith or whatever, Tomei or whatever. And I looked at him and his car. He was driving a 1924 Chrysler green four-door sedan. And I said to Mr. So-and-so, I said, you know, I think you need a new car. He says, well, I've been thinking about it. And I says, well, I have a deal on with a Ford dealer in Milwaukee, that if I find someone that'll buy a new car, he would buy an adder and our high school annual. He says, well, I've been thinking about the Ford, because in 1935, Ford made a complete change to their automobile. They got rid of the suicide doors and the wheelbases. They lengthened the spring bases, so it made a nice riding car. They called it center poise. Mm-hmm. So he says, yes, I've been thinking about that car. And I says, well, I have to go to school now, but I says at 3:30 I'll be down there at the dealership. So I want to tell you, at 3:31, when the bell rung at Milwaukee Union High School, I ran the 9 or 7 blocks to Brennan Motor Car Company. And I saw Mr. Brennan there, and I said, Mr. Brennan, I have a man that may be down here to look at the new cars. He's the Oregonian carrier. Well, to make a long story short, that man went home in a new 1935 black four-door sedan. And Mr. Brennan bought a half-page ad in the Milwaukee High School Annual.
And did he hire a new salesman?
Oh, then afterwards, after about 2-3 weeks later, he came up to the farm one night. I was washing radishes or whatever I was doing. He said, do you know Mrs. So-and-so up in Ardenwald? And I said, yes, she's a widow and a daughter. He says, well, she's interested in a new car, and she said that she would like the demonstration. And he said, since you can talk a little Italian, the dialect, why, I'd want you to go and demonstrate the car to her. I said, sure, I'll do that. He says, well, I'll make an arrangement for you to demonstrate, and I'll let you know ahead of time, so then you clean up and you look like a salesman. You come down to the dealership, get a demonstrator, go up and demonstrate the car. So a few nights later, why, that occurred. So I went out and demonstrated the car to him and the daughter, so which was a prospect. And then a week later, Mr. Brennan said to me, why, I've got a couple other people to contact. And so I got into it, and I said, gee, this is for me. That's better than washing radishes. You get to drive a new car and talk to people. I thought, this is great. I just love it. So that's how we carried on. And then in 1936, I continued selling a few cars. How I met, this will lead to this story. We had taken in a 1930 29 or 30 Model A Roadster, which had the the spare tire on each, what we call a side mount, and had a luggage rack in the back. We taken in trade on a new pickup truck from a fisherman down in Astoria. Well, one afternoon I'm working down there at the dealership, and in comes a young fellow. He says, I want to buy a car. And I says, well, great. He says, but I only have $100 to spend. And I says, well, we have a little Model A Roadster here that we've taken in, and Mr. Brennan has a price on it of $125. Well, he says, maybe I could stretch it a little bit. And I said, well, I'll go talk to Mr. Brennan. So I said, what's your name? And he says, Jack Jennings. And he says, my brother has the marina down there, Staff Jennings Marina. And he says, I work with my brother down there. And this was Jack. Turned out to be, he was my age, too. So I went to Mr. Brennan and I said, say, I have a young man out here that wants to buy this Model A Roadster. but he only has $100. And I said, maybe he'll pay $110. He says, sell it to him. So I sold him the car for $110. And then in talking, I said to Jack, I said, well, I bought a little boat with a trailer, but I'd like to find a moorage where I could moor the boat. So then if I can get away for a little time in the evening, go down and get in the boat and go out and take a run in the river. He says, well, we have moorages down there. He says, you come on down. He says, I can fix you up with a little moorage down there for about $5 a month.
Now, is this same place that Staff Jennings is now by the west end of the Selwood Bridge?
Selwood Bridge,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I took the boat down there, and I got the mooring space, and that's when I met Staff Jennings. And I'd go down there and always bought my gasoline for the boat, and that's how we became acquainted. And then, as you know, in 1939, we became the best of friends.
That's a wonderful story. And we have about 5 minutes until this show is in, but we might have to do another one. So tell us your story, because it is just a fascinating story.
Yes, American Red Cross believes that too.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and a couple of their books, why that story is listed in
It's
there.
just amazing. It's hard to believe. And you've got a article here that Richard will be able to take a picture of. And I just said to Anna here, this good-looking guy, I can't imagine that anybody would let him go. So tell us about what happened with you.
Well, this Sunday afternoon, a friend of mine, Bill Allison, who worked for the telephone company, and another fellow, I can't remember his name now, we each had a boat, so we'd go down there in the river and race around, see who was the fastest. We didn't squirrel around too much. We just wanted to race down the river. But we always wore life jackets because to play it safe. So towards the Sunday evening, Bill said to me, he says, well, I'm going to go home. I said, yeah, it's time to go home. So it was about 6:30 in the evening. Well, we all decided to go home, and I pulled over to the moorage to gas up the boat and then put it at its mooring place and go home because I had the family car. So I pulled up to the dock there, and Staff Jennings was working there. He was getting ready to close the place up. And his wife was waiting for him to come to dinner, and they lived in the boathouse was over the shop. It was a big building which they later moved out of the water up onto land. And she was waiting for him to come up to dinner to close up after he closed up. So as he was filling the gas tank, I said, boy, I'm hungry. I said, I'm going to get something. So I bought a bottle of strawberry soda pop and a candy bar, which at that time they were nickel each. And I gave him a $5 bill in payment for this 10-cent purchase. And he turned to me and he says, I don't have any paper money. I'll have to give you all silver. And I said, oh, that's okay, Staff. All the better to weigh me down if I fall in. So he gave me 4 silver dollars, then they were the big silver dollars, and then 90 cents, and I put it in my pocket. And I said, now I'm going to go moor the boat. Well, I got in the boat, and I left the moorage, went up underneath the Selwood Bridge, which would be south or upriver, and started to make a turn to come back to the mooring spot, which was behind his boathouse or dock there, the little dock that I had. And that's when either a freakish wave or I may have hit a submerged log or something, but the boat spun around and I hit the side of the boat and it stunned me because I don't remember leaving the boat.
Now, did you have your life jacket on?
No.
Now, why is it? You said you usually had it, but you didn't have it that time.
Because I was only going to go 4 feet.
Okay, got it. Okay.
That's when it happens,
Okay.
you know, when
Okay,
you're
sure.
not prepared, things happen. And so I didn't put my life jacket on. I was going to go, 600-800 feet and moor the
Right.
boat, see, underneath the Selwood Bridge and back to the moorage. And so I don't remember leaving the boat, but after I got into the water, you go to take in air. Well, since you're in water, you're going to take in water. So I just went like that, just filled up with water, and it was like overeating. I just relaxed, and then the thought came to me, I'm going to die.
And you went down?
I started down, and first thing I thought of my mother, that she'd get all my life insurance money for her losing me. I thought that would compensate, you know. And I had double indemnity on my insurance policies, that they paid double the value.
If it were an accident?
Accident, correct. And so I started settling down. Then I did double up my right leg to try and take the shoe off, but it wouldn't come off, and that didn't bother me. And
you were just resigned to dying.
yes, and I was relaxed. I wasn't noticing any pressure. I wasn't fighting, struggling, or anything. I was going down. And then when I hit the bottom of the river, I thought, gee, I could walk toward shore. But I lost sense of direction. And I thought, maybe instead of walking toward shore, I may walk out in the middle of the river. But about that moment, I could feel that I was losing.
You're losing consciousness.
Yeah, that to me, death was coming over. And I felt of a huge rock, and I laid down next to this rock, and death came over me, a black cloud. Most pleasant death, suffered no discomfort, nothing. It was just a pleasant death.
So you don't remember choking or anything like
Nothing. It was just nothing.
And then
I've said this a billion times.
we have 1 minute. You've got to tell quickly what happened.
And so, and Staff Jennings' wife was waiting for me, or waiting for him to come up to dinner, and she happened to be standing out in that back porch, and she saw me go out of the boat. So she started calling my name, and then the boat came by with nobody in it, and Staff knew that an accident happened. Of course, she was pointing at the point where I'd gone down. So he put a skiff in the water, rowed up to the approximate spot, cast the hooks down, which were on a bar 5 feet long with 15 sturgeon hooks, and he drug about 10 feet and had something on.
But it wasn't you.
It pulled it up, was a piece of waterlogged slabwood. So he cast the hooks again, drug about another 25 feet, and then the rope came slack, and then it came taut or tight again. And the summation was that this bar went over the rock and slid off to the side, and the end hook caught my leather jacket on the left side.
And pulled you up.
And pulled me up.
And how deep was the water at that point?
45 feet.
45 feet.
The Oregonian, the Journal, and the News Telegram 2 days later went out there. They measured, they had Staff Jennings go through the movement, and he couldn't do it under 35 minutes. And they established that I was down there 23 minutes.
23 minutes that you were
People who saw the accident said I was down there for over half an hour. But the Red Cross, because Staff Jennings got 5 medals for saving me.
Wow.
And they had to establish a definite time that I was in the water.
So at least 23 minutes, but some people said it was over a half hour, and you lived to tell it. Folks, we have got to go because our time is up. But I'm going to have these folks on again, and you can hear what's happened to the rest of this man's life. He is a miracle here, and we'll be hearing about the rest of their life next week. So stay tuned for the next edition of this show.
Episode.
Right. So thanks very much to Anna and Ernie Bisio, who are pioneers here in Milwaukee, and we will see you again next week. This is Carolyn Tomei, State Representative, and you're watching Milwaukee Today, and we're talking about Milwaukee yesterday. See you again next week. Bye-bye.